In this episode, I talk about brace and, more importantly, what we can do about it. As you might guess, the solution is a little about the horse and a lot about us. It takes two to keep a brace going, and it's our responsibility to dissolve it. So here we go, episode 191, Dissolving Brace. Hi, I'm Karen Rohlf, and welcome to Horse Training in Harmony. This podcast is about you making progress with your horse in a way that you both can love. It's about learning how to move and be in harmony. Because yes, you really can develop a horse to be both athletic and happy. When we show up as our best selves for our horses will show up for us. So let's get started. I am super happy to be back here with a new podcast episode. I just wrote a blog on the subject of dissolving brace, and you can find that in my blog, or I'll link to it in the show notes. And some of you here may have noticed that I'm now releasing new podcast episodes on a more flexible schedule. So a couple things about that. First is that unless you've listened to every single episode, I always recommend searching the archives, even if I don't release a new episode. I find that even randomly picking an episode can lead to some ahas that you weren't expecting. And also, I'm going to be often reintroducing particular episodes that usually answer common themes that are coming up lately with questions that students have, or just that I know are super important topics. Now, my decision to be more flexible about the podcast episodes can actually be related to a couple concepts I talk about. One is the love it or change it concept, but it's also applicable to the topic here today, the subject of brace. So here's the thing. I love doing this podcast. I find it strangely entertaining to sit in a room by myself and talk to inanimate objects. But I'm always thinking of you guys when I'm recording. So anyway, I love doing the podcast, but I started noticing a bit of disharmony, or one may say brace, about getting new episodes out every week. I mean, a lot of times it's really easy to do it, but sometimes not so much. So in the spirit of practicing what I preach, I contemplated whether I needed to find a way to love the process of getting them out every week more, or somehow make it more efficient or more fun, or perhaps there was a change I could make. And I landed on changing it because I realized that it was the schedule, not the podcast, that was creating some brace. Now, also, as you'll see in this episode, or as you'll hear in this episode, one of the causes of brace is when you try to stay in a fixed position. Now, that weekly schedule is very fixed, so I decided to supple up the schedule by playing with it a little bit more and leaving it flexible. So the great news about all of this is that whenever a new podcast episode comes out, it's because I was excited to record it for you. And this way, you are always going to get the very best of me. Okay, let's dive into dissolving brace. So when I talk to students or go to clinics or do the Q&A calls for our courses, it's so great because we get to hear what challenges people are having, and I get to hear how people are talking about their challenges. And a common thing that can come up, especially with students newer to Dressage Naturally, is they'll say something like, I'm really struggling with my bracy horse, or my horse is so bracy and I'm struggling. And I think one of the first things that we want to do is to stop labeling our horses as bracy. I know it's one of those little distinctions with words, but my horse is bracing is different than my horse is bracy. because chances are they're not bracing all the time, 24/7 in all circumstances. So one of the keys to solving it is to make sure you're not just making a generalized statement about who they are, and you're starting to get curious about exactly what you're feeling and when. And that's going to lead you to the cause of the brace, which is going to lead you to the solution. Now, I know that probably seems obvious, but so often I see that brace is almost looked on or looked at as a character flaw or a behavior issue. So it can feel like the horse is willfully deciding to go against you, right? You put your aids on and the horse is like, no, and goes on lockdown, right? So a brace can feel like a no. And when people experience this feeling of like, my horse is doing this to me, then it's easy to take the next step of thinking that you have to teach the horse to yield or obey, right? Of course, we want things to get more supple and more open and more yielding, but there's a difference between, hey, you can't do that, you must yield to me because I said so, obeying this, the ask, and trying to figure out how to dissolve the brace. So we want to make sure that we're not looking at brace as an issue of submission. Now, I've talked before about how dressage can have a sort of more beautiful interpretation of that word submission, but here I'm meaning it's not an issue of dominant versus submissive. The horse doesn't need to submit to what I ask just because I asked it. In fact, that mindset is part of the problem. I've also heard people describe their horses something like, my horse feels like a 2x4, right? So they're experiencing something in their body where their body feels inflexible in some ways. So like, my horse feels like a board, they're 2x4. And if you think of it that way, then it's easy for the brain to take the next step and go, oh, it's a physically stiff object. Then we need to manipulate the body to move in a different way. The trouble is, if you're asking the body to move and it doesn't move, and the solution is, well, let's ask it to move even more. Let's ask the body to move in the ways it's already resisting moving. Then again, it becomes this conflict. I asked you to move, you saying no, I'm going to show you you can move it that way. And I know this sounds like maybe obvious that doesn't make any sense, but how much equipment have we seen put on that does exactly that leverages the body so we can get it to go in the place where the horse is resisting it going. So horses are not merely physical lumps of clay where strongly squeezing and pressing on it will make them soft. Right? So you think of a big brick of clay, you start kneading it and working it, and it softens up and it gets more pliable. It's not necessarily true with horses in the same way. Yes, once you get them to open their body, you can do exercises that increase flexibility, that gradually invite the body to move, to more and more degrees at whatever the direction they're going. But that's very delicate. That's not just grabbing it, squeezing it, pressing it, pushing it, and molding it into some sort of shape. So dissolving brace is much more a matter of balance and trust. So the key to eliminating brace, just generally, the sort of context you want to be approaching this with, is to, number one, see brace as a complex issue with many possible causes. It's not just, oh, their neck is stiff. I mean, maybe it's stiff, but maybe not. See it as more complex with many possible causes. Secondly, to dissolve brace, you need to eliminate those causes. Makes sense, right? Look for all the causes and start eliminating them. And number three, to take responsibility for your role, our role, my role. We're all responsible. As soon as we're in the energetic space of the horse, we are now part of the system. So take responsibility for your role in creating the brace in the first place, or even perpetuating it. So tango, it takes two to tango. Well, tango isn't the only thing that it takes two to do. All right, so as many of you know on this podcast, when I want to explore a subject, I look up the definition of it. So I Googled definition of brace, and there's two elements to the definition of brace. One is to prepare oneself for something difficult or unpleasant. The other definition is to tense the muscles in one's body to stay stiffly in a certain position. So when applying this idea to horses, it makes sense that to eliminate brace, we must make things less unpleasant and not make it a requirement for the horse to stay in a certain position. So if you seek to make things more pleasant in general and adopt a more playful way of achieving the postures that you want, you're going to already be addressing two of the main reasons for brace. And of course, then from there, we can be more specific. So let's look at why horses might brace. So as I said before, a brace can feel like your horse saying no to your request. But instead of being personally insulted, we need to just ask why. Interesting. Why do I feel this brace? And I look at bracing as a defense mechanism. So why does our horse feel the need to protect himself? What is he protecting himself from? There can be many reasons. So again, it's going to change. I feel it changes the compassion with which I solve this problem. If instead of seeing the brace as my horse is blocking me, my horse is saying no to me, my horse is willfully, ignoring me, or my horse is a 2x4, and going, wow, what is he protecting himself from? Because that little change of mind shift will already put me in a more compassionate and curious state of mind. All right, so let's play around with some reasons. So I came up with some reasons, why a horse may be protecting himself. One is lack of clarity. So I think of that as a mental brace. The horse could be confused, could be unsure about what to do, and that can cause resistance. You're going to resist being pushed to do something if you're not sure what you're supposed to do. I think we can relate to that. And in that situation, let's say you're being pushed to do something and you don't even understand what you're supposed to be doing, and now someone's yelling at you, and now add on that maybe there's a fear of punishment if you get it wrong, or stronger and stronger aids in the moment, which, if you put yourself in those shoes, that's just going to make things worse. So lack of clarity, mental brace. So if you feel like that might be the thing for your horse, you'd be asking, what does my horse need to know? What's he confused about? So another reason for brace, or type of brace maybe, could be lack of balance. That's a big one. So I put that in the physical brace department. And now there's always going to be room for sort of improvement in balance and refining a balance. That's really what dressage is about, is doing more and more athletic and complicated things and being able to stay in balance when we do them. And with riding, even small imbalances or misalignments will cause brace somewhere in the body. If one part is falling over, another part needs to hold on in order to keep the system from literally falling down. So I think about imbalance can be within the horse's body. And let's say we're riding now. It could be within the horse's body. It could be within our own bodies as we sit on the horse. And of course, there can be lack of balance between the horse and rider, and we're both throwing each other off, right? So if we think it's a physical brace, And of course, mental and physical will affect each other. If the horse is mentally braced, he's also bracing parts of his body. So it becomes like, okay, there's lots of layers to this. Making progress in any layer at a time will help. And then you slowly peel that onion and get to the core where everything starts to help everything. But looking at the bodies and thinking, where is the misalignment? Where is in the horse, in myself? And where are the horse and I throwing each other off? Okay, so another type of brace can come from fear. I'll put that in the emotional brace category. So if the horse is afraid, you have to address that first. You have to acknowledge fear every single time. And, sometimes you can do some things that can help them work through the fear. It doesn't mean you have to stop in your tracks, but you have to acknowledge when fear is there, because it is going to affect everything. And so in this moment, if you think your horse is having some emotional brace due to fear in some way, then you have to be patient and trustworthy. I mean, that's the answer. I mean, think of a time when you're like anxious or afraid and somebody looks at you and says, just relax. I dare you. Husbands, I dare you to say to your wives, just relax. Anyway, I think you get the idea. Like, you can't yell at someone to become less afraid. And, and how would you feel in your body if someone was physically pushing you, or maybe even just verbally pushing you to do something that you're actually afraid to do? It's gonna create more brace in that moment. So, like I said, if you have a good partnership with your horse, meaning there's already some trust there, and he's only slightly anxious, it's like, oh, this is new, I don't know, I'm a little afraid. Like I said, there are things you can do and you can ask him to do that will help dissipate the fear and maybe get through that moment. Like, whoa, that was scary, but I trusted you and I did it and I'm okay. Right? So I don't mean that when there's fear, you have to stop all movement or intention or progress. But don't make the mistake of resorting to merely forcing your horse to physically submit to your control when he's anxious in his mind. Like I said, maybe there's a moment you can get him past a low threshold thing, you get to the other side and he's fine. But you have to be careful, because some horses will give you their bodies, but the emotional damage can go deep. I remember when I was doing some eventing, and I had a horse that was afraid to jump over ditches. And some people would tell me, just go really fast, just run at it faster, because they can't stop in time. They just pick up their feet and they'll be over it. But luckily, I think a wiser person said, yes, that technique works, but only once. Because you lose the trust. You can lose the trust, and the next time they'll be prepared. And of course, every horse is different. That's the journey. Okay. More braces, but wait, there's more. So another kind of emotional brace is lack of motivation. And, we can debate whether that's actually a brace or not, but I know that lightness and self-carriage are easier when a horse is naturally animated and engaged and keen. So if a horse knows what to do and wants to do it, there's going to be less need for him to lean on you and less need for you to physically pressure the horse. And the last type of brace that I'll talk about here is another physical brace, which is the lack of skill. So horses can brace when they're asked to do something that they don't have the strength or the stamina or the coordination for. And so getting really specific about exactly what skill the horse needs to practice is going to be the first step in solving it. And, ideally, training is a gradual progression where each of their skills builds upon the other. But in reality, sometimes we ask too much and they can't. And so they start to lean on us for support. So this list already is going to give you a lot of ways to look and diagnose and start to problem solve. If it's something they're fearful about, we got to address that and build confidence. Right? If it's lack of a motivation, how do we make it more fun? How can we do the same thing in a naturally more inspiring circumstance? Feel the difference there. A lot of times people struggle with keeping their horse's energy flowing during lateral work. And a lot of times what I tell people is do it on the trail. Get out of the arena. Go somewhere they want to go and do it out there. All right. Let's look now at a common area of brace and how to melt that away. And so that area is brace in the reins. Yep, everybody's favorite or least favorite. So of all the braces that riders complain about, brace in the reins is likely the most common. And it is the reason for the creation of so many strong bits and leveraged apparatuses. Apparatus? What's the plural of apparatus? Maybe, I don't know. Anyway, apparatuses. I'll let you guys look it up. Designed to try to get horses to stop putting so much pressure on the reins. Right? Go in any tack shop, you'll see it there. And really, if you think about it, connecting human hands, which are built to grab things, to a piece of metal in the most sensitive part of the horse, which is like the mouth and tongue area, which is connected to the most delicate and highly innervated joint in the horse's body, the TMJ, and then put all that at the end of the most flexible part of the horse's neck, is a recipe for brace. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, if these are such delicate structures, then why would the horse lean so hard on the bit? It almost looks like they like it. They lean so hard. However, if you think about brace as a defensive behavior, it makes perfect sense. So I want you to imagine something now. Imagine you are wearing big hoop earrings. You have a pierced ear and you're wearing big hoop earrings. And now imagine someone that you maybe know, maybe you don't know, maybe you trust them, maybe you don't trust them. Now imagine that person reaches up and goes to grab one of your earrings. If you can really picture it, I'm willing to bet that even just thinking about this made you just tense up your neck and your shoulders, like your shoulders just went up to your ears. If you imagine somebody grabbing your hoop earring, which actually won't help anything at all, but it's just a natural reflex. If there's a delicate structure and you think it's in danger or it might hurt, you are gonna become rigid just to splint the area and protect yourself. Right? If you walk into a room and think someone's going to punch you in the stomach, you are going to lock down and tense those muscles in your stomach to protect you. Now, when it comes to the reins and bits, we need to remember that although bits cause their fair share of problems, all the problems of the body are going to show up in the reins when riding in connection with the reins, with a bit or without. So to solve brace in the reins, you must take in the whole picture and solve the brace by eliminating all the reasons. Yes, all of the reasons. Aim for all of them and you'll hit the ones that you need. But if you want to try to eliminate all the reasons that feed into that brace. And that's why in what I teach, I think that learning how to use your reins for as few things as possible is a great way to start. And that's why I even do bridleless riding or riding with loose reins. It just gives you so much information, and in that is the answer to the brace. So if you only need your reins for 3 little things, then that's, instead of 20 things, steering and shaping and bending and this and that and that. Anytime you use your reins, you're tempting a brace to appear if it wants to appear. All right, so Now, on the other hand, in a very refined, sophisticated way, having the reins there so that you can feel braces that are in the body that you would not feel if the reins weren't there is actually really cool. And that's when you start feeding this great loop where everything helps everything, because if you can feel the brace in the reins, then you get a chance to solve it on a deeper level than you might be able to do bridleless. Anyway, it's an artful process, but I think it's important to look at it this way, because too many times there are horses that feel strong, quote, in the contact. They're just bracing their bodies, and you feel that in the reins. But because people feel heaviness in the reins, the horse is subjected to stronger and stronger bits and increasingly restrictive leveraged equipment, such as like draw reins. And as you can imagine, that's just going to make it worse, because they're going to need to protect themselves even more. So dissolving brace is not about the horse submitting to control. I've seen horses have their heads tied with their nose to one of their stirrups and left there for hours to, and I'm quoting, teach them how to give to the bend. I've seen horses tied with their heads up high in the stall to, quote, teach them to relax their necks. There are nose bands with sharp edges that sit on the delicate structures of the nose. There are bits made of bicycle chains. And there's, I'm sure, even more horrible practices out there. All of these are about the horse submitting to physical control, and all of these deal with the wrong end of the problem. And they certainly don't build trust. They either create more defensive behavior, or, and this is the sad part, they cause horses to just give up. But it's not out of education into lightness. It's just out of the heaviness of hopelessness. And that's the kind of lightness that I don't want to feel. So eliminating brace is about building trust and balance. It's about inviting the horse to open very small doors. So when a horse braces, instead of thinking they need to give me more, I think about asking for less. When I'm, for example, talking to the head and neck, I'll start with very, what I call micro yields. Just putting a little feel. And if the horse blocks against it, I just wait there. I wait for the horse to be brave enough to let go. And I promise that when he gives, I will not take. For example, the tiniest amount of pressure on the rein, and if he blocks or braces, I just wait there. I don't ask for more. It could be so small that an observer might not see anything happening. But I feel it, and I wait, and I send the message, you're okay. I'm not going to take anything. And when he dares to relax his defense system, I let go. So how many horses, if they're bracy to, say, lateral flexion, the nose is then brought to the knee? They're asking for more, which makes the horse defend himself more or give up. So doing these micro yields, the more the horse trusts, the more quickly he's going to let go of the brace, and he'll open that very small door of the first half a degree of flexion. And eventually the door is going to open from the very first touch. He's like, sure, it ain't no thing. It's a good deal for him because I don't take when he gives. And from there, then we can progressively increase the degree of movement expected. But if the horse is holding that door shut, saying, no, it doesn't matter if I am able to physically put his body there through leverage or force, he's still bracing on the inside. It might work once, but he's still bracing on the inside, and he's going to likely try to protect himself more the next time. So if we build balance and trust, the horses will walk through the doorways of our suggestion more and more easily over time. So again, now imagine a horse is moving. They're riding. They're, say, cantering along, and they feel a little stiff on that left rein, and the rider then asks for a little lateral flexion, and the horse blocks. How on earth would it make sense to then ask for even more? You couldn't do an inch? Let's do 3 feet. You can't move your nose 1 degree? Let's bring it 180 degrees around until you're looking backwards and your nose is on my knee. I've seen this. It happens. Right? So if you look at it as a defense system, that makes 0 sense. If he felt like he had to protect himself against a little, he will protect himself more if he thinks the rider's going to take a lot. And imagine now you're cantering, and he's cantering and he's looking backwards. That's a big balance challenge. In that moment, the rider isn't doing a yoga flexibility thing. You know, some horses are so flexible, they could actually do that and keep their balance. That's amazing. That's a goal. But to say that's the solution to a horse who's bracing is, to me, it doesn't make any sense at all. I'll be nice. So, if you're looking for your horse to become more open, look for the very smallest doors and invite your horse to open them by being trustworthy. You know, so many people call their horses stiff or like a board, but then that same horse, I've seen this a million times. So let's say you're doing you want to like increase your horse's flexibility on the ground. So you're doing these stretches, and maybe you're having a little feel on the halter, and you're trying to get your horse to bend his neck. And he's like, oh, he's so stiff. And then you walk away and he's got an itch, like on his croup or his stifle or back leg somewhere. And the horse just like rebalances himself, wraps around and gets his nose. You know, my horses can itch their tails with their teeth. And you're like, huh? Is the horse really stiff like a board, or is he just defending himself against you? And I mean, it's not just you. I mean, this happens to me. It's an artful process. It's the endless process. I'm not immune to this. I have to build this with my horses every single day. I have a really powerful simulation that I do for connection with the reins. I do it at clinics. If you're in the video classroom, you can look up a video called October 2011, Connection with the Reins, Dissolving Brace. And if you go to my blog, there's a little video clip of this, but the full video is in the classroom where I go through the whole process and describe everything. So video classroom, October 2011, Connection with the Reins, Dissolving Brace. Anyway, but what I do is I ask for a partner to be a bracey horse. And I have a set of reins, and we face each other, and I say, okay, you be a bracey horse, they hold the reins, I hold the other end of the reins, and they start pulling and tugging on the reins. And at first I brace with them, and so we're both bracing and tugging and pulling, and in a way we become balanced in our bracey tension, right? We're still standing up. Shit, we haven't pulled each other over, but we're obviously fighting each other. And in that moment, if someone came and just cut the reins, we'd both fall over, right? So we as a system are balanced in our bracey tension. We're kind of stuck there together. Neither one of us is enjoying it, but we actually have no way out, right? Because we're both secretly hoping that the other one doesn't let go, because we're so off balance. We're off balance in ourselves and balanced together, counterbalancing together in our brace. And, you know, so you can kind of picture that. And this is the same situation. Maybe some of you have had lessons and your instructor is saying, you know, let go of the inside rein. Stop pulling on the left rein. You know, often it's the left one. You know, stop pulling on the left rein. And you're thinking, it is impossible. I'm not pulling. My horse is pulling. And if I give, my horse just takes it. And now he's going the wrong direction. So I have to take the left rein. And now we're bracing. So that's that counterbalance, right? It feels like you need to hold on to it, but it can't be comfortable for the horse, and it's definitely not comfortable for you, but you're stuck. So anyway, so the next stage of the simulation. So we're in there in the brace. And then I start making some changes. And without moving, without giving, without putting my hand forward and letting go, I make some changes in my mind and my body. And then next thing you know, there's a loop in the reins. And I look at my partner, I said, I told you to brace on me. And they start pulling on the reins again, but usually just like a couple times. And then they stand there looking at me and they go, oh, there's nothing to brace on. There's nothing to brace against. Exactly. So the next logical question is, what did you do? That's what people ask. Like, what did you just do? Because it's almost imperceptible to just look physically. So there's three kind of things that I do, and I'll list them, but it's in no particular order. They happen simultaneously, and any one of these things by itself might work. So picture we're facing each other and we're both kind of pulling on the reins and bracing. So one thing I change is I look up at them and I smile and I send happy energy to them. I know that sounds silly, but it works. I smile at them and I send happy energy to them. Next, other thing that I do is I come into my own balance. So I make an adjustment in my posture so I'm in my own balance. So if those reins were cut, I would not fall over. And the third thing is, I think my intention there is I look at the person smiling and I think, you can lean on me as much as you want. You just can't have me. You just can't have my balance. So in that moment, I become like a tree or a fence post. They can pull all they want. Doesn't bother me. I'm not in the system anymore. And this is in contrast to before, where I'm thinking something like, give me the reins. You can't have those. And so then once we kind of have this, like this difference between the conflicting bracing contact and then a positive contact where we don't have that feeling of being bracing and in conflict with each other. It's independent of the number of pounds of pressure. So some people say, what's the pounds of pressure? How many ounces? How many pounds? I'm like, it doesn't matter, because you can have really icky, bracy contact that's light, and you can have positive contact that's actually fairly strong. So we play around with different degrees of contact, and again, even with a fairly strong pressure, it can feel really positive and unbracy if I stay in my own balance and I stay friendly. Then the next thing I do is, once we have that feeling of that nice, unbraced, positive connection, I have my partner close their eyes and I say, I'm going to change something, and I want you to tell me when you first feel a brace, when you get your first inkling of a brace. And they close their eyes and I start to change any one of those three things. I stop smiling at them, I think gimme, and I let myself be a little off balance somewhere. And often the person will say they feel brace at the very first moment I changed any one of those things. It is so slight. It's amazing. It's within seconds. And so, bottom line of this exercise, what we play with is, if they were trying to be bracy, I could be in a way that caused them to stop bracing and just like there's nothing to brace against. Also, even if they wanted to be soft, I could change something in me to cause them to start bracing. So, yes, some horses have already developed patterns of bracing, and even a perfect rider, and when they meet that horse, they will feel that horse is braced. However, it will more quickly dissolve when that rider is focusing on being friendly and in their own balance, and not immediately going to, I must manipulate the horse. So my first thought when I feel bracing in a horse is to make sure that I'm not giving the horse a reason to brace. That's my first thought. Whoa, what am I doing to make this brace happen? And then ultimately, how can I be a reason to dissolve the brace? And I think back about that list that we talked about. Is this lack of clarity? Is there fear? Where's the imbalance? And etc. And finally, I wanted to talk about the power of kindness. Now, the more decades of experience I gain, the more I am convinced of the power of kindness. Now, training horses is a little about technique, and it's a lot about the mindset with which it's delivered. And kindness is the key. You can be highly effective and still be kind. Now, probably some of you, upon hearing this, are nodding along in agreement and perhaps even thinking a little amen under your breath. Others of you might be thinking, yeah, but what about that horse that just tanks through everything and pushes everyone around? So now the establishment of boundaries does have a role in rehabilitating horses who brace. And, I kind of put that in the balance category, right? Because it's this kind of balance it's the key to self-carriage. So there's mental, emotional, and physical self-carriage, and all of those will need to be addressed when dissolving brace. Yes, so horses that are, you can picture the type. They just like tense all their muscles and they just chest through things. They just turn, they like grab the line and turn their head and just go whatever direction they want. That kind of braced mentally, physically, and probably emotionally too. Those horses, I would think of it as like a boundary. There's some boundary issues. So, often it is the clarification of, hey, you stay there and I'll stay here. Something about spatial orientation, right? You don't cross this line, stay there. It's that misunderstandings around there that prevents us from getting, tangled up in bracey systems, right? So if we clarify some basic rules about boundaries and spatial relationships, we won't get tangled up in the bracey system. That makes sense? I kind of fumbled over those words. Anyway, so it's important to have some rules and to make sure that the horse understands them. This is the absolute beginning of self-carriage, and self-carriage is an important piece of eliminating brace. So you can do this on the ground with spatial boundaries, and while riding, I think of it as teaching the horse responsibility for line of direction and stopping without needing the reins. So teaching horses simple rules for where they are going with their bodies is, for me, a foundational lesson that can eliminate so many causes of brace. And the clarity around that very simple point, horses really understand spatial, relationships. Clarity around this really can be kindness. So many riders who struggle with brace can be pretty sloppy and maybe less clear with their basics around that, around space and boundaries and line of direction. And then they're getting into arguments with their horses over sophisticated or advanced communications like the bend in their half pass or the inside rein, feeling the inside rein during shoulder in. So taking the time to make the easy things easier will make the harder things easier too. And once those boundaries are clarified through education, I've found that improving how my horse feels about my touch is incredibly powerful. So boundaries, and then my moving massage technique, and you can look this up in the video classroom again, just search moving massage and you'll get a bunch of videos. It's a technique where I'm moving with my horse and have my hand on him, but I'm touching him purely with the intention of love and kindness. So if I touch my horse and feel an area of tension, I stay there, but with the message of, hey, what's going on there? Can you release that? I want you to be comfortable. You don't need to do that. You're okay. Something like that. So I'm touching them without asking for anything from them. I'm not asking anything from them. I'm not asking anything of them. I simply want them to understand that my touch is not something that's demanding or taking, but as something that's helpful, something that, it finds maybe an area of tension, but they then are able to release it in a way that they might not have had I not touched them with that loving, supportive, helpful touch. I want them to feel better after my touch, the way I feel better after a massage. So the moving massage is so powerful, and it's an exercise that can really change everything because it changes the relationship that you have with your horse. And in the blog, if you go to the blog for this topic, I do have just a short clip showing the results of a moving massage, just so you can get the idea of it. But again, go to the video classroom, you can see a whole bunch of training videos on it. All right, to sum up, remember to see brace as a complex issue with many possible causes. Take responsibility for your role in creating or perpetuating the brace. Make being with you more pleasant, and don't make your horse stay in a fixed position. Dissolving brace is about balance and trust. Dissolving brace is about mental, emotional, and physical self-carriage. Dissolving brace is about inviting your horse to open very small doors he's holding shut and not using that door to go in and take something from him. It takes two to tango, and it takes two to brace. Change your balance, your attitude, and your technique, and you'll have a chance to really dance together. I hope this helps.